it really comes down to, if you're limited on time, then, all right, I got Saturday and Sunday off, and per DeerCast, Saturday shows okay, and Sunday shows great. So DeerCast is picking up something in that person's area because it's analyzing 13 different weather variables as well as the 13 different phases on an hour by hour basis in their neck of the woods. So DeerCast has picked something up that it really likes. Okay. So if I'm that person and I have 2 days to hunt, the okay day, I'm still going to.
This segment of DoD TV is brought to you by Leupold, American to the core.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drury Outdoors 100% Wild podcast. It's powered by DeerCast, and I am Tim Chelsnick.
I'm Matt Drury, and we got Mark Drury on, and we got all three of us in three different locations today.
Yeah, I got a sick kiddo, so I am broadcasting from the downstairs studio at my place, and so we are in our satellite DeerCast studio.
There you go. And I'm in my satellite DeerCast studio at the farm. So.
Which is
satellites.
A permanent place for you. It's especially from here on, basically to the end of the season. That is the hub for Mark.
Essentially, I mean, we kind of kicked off the season yesterday. And yesterday was our first card pull. So we looked at a few of them, but the bulk of them we still have to look at. And I got a text from Wade and Perry because we worked on that all day yesterday, and then went and joined Dustin Lynch for his concert in Des Moines. And they were texting me today. They were like, "Hey, you're not looking through those cards, are you?" I go, "No way, man. I'll wait for you guys. I'm not gonna do that to you." So
you guys have a little like a viewing party, right?
Generally, I mean, because it essentially lays your season out right in front of you, right there. Like you see what grew and what didn't, and we have so many plots that are kind of hidden and hard to get to. We don't do a lot of velvet scouting. Essentially, we just let the analogic supplement go, bring them in front of the cameras, and then view it all and see what the inventory looks like and what the season might hold. And then you start going, "Oh wow, he blew. There's our number one targets," and then you start putting plans together based on previous trail history for those particular target bugs.
Well, then by the time I see you this weekend, I expect to see some new pictures, basically.
For sure. Well, hopefully if we get through them, we've still got some projects on the farm, but we'll find time. I can promise you. So.
Yeah.
We should be through them by then, certainly. Yeah.
Do you guys ever feel a little bad because there are more pictures of animals on your phone than your family?
No.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah. I try to balance it out.
Yeah, right. That's a lie.
I keep them in files, right? So I delete them out of my main, and then I have them in files. So
okay,
it still looks pretty good if you just go to my.
I will say, Mark, when you ask him for a picture, it does not take him long. Like he just all of a sudden he gets the phone up and he kind of puts some glasses up like this, and then he just boom, he's got it. Could be from 4 years ago, and he'll have it. He's very organized on his cell phone.
Gotta be analytical about everything.
Well, I know we've got a lot of people watching the show this time around because as people join the 100% Wild podcast crew Facebook group, in the questions, in like the entry questions, we always ask them what's their favorite thing about the podcast. And like probably 7 out of 10 say when Mark and Terry are on. I think the rest of them feel like they kind of got bait and switched.
It's like, it was the Drury Outdoors podcast. Where's Mark and Terry? Well, we have a Drury on it. So
who are these clowns?
Joke's on you.
Gotcha. So I know like we got some shout outs to get through, but I know that we want to talk a little bit about like Mark's going to peel back the layers a little bit on DeerCast and help people understand like what really goes into the most advanced deer hunting app that's on the market right now and help people understand a little bit what's behind it and how to get the most out of it. Like we talk about this all the time. We want to help hunters get better at what they do, and there's a lot of educational aspects to DeerCast that I think kind of get overlooked. And it's not just a should you hunt or shouldn't you hunt. but it's here's why, here's what the factors are at play for that particular time in your particular neck of the woods. And here's what Mark and Terry have learned over their combined 70 years of deer hunting as to why that matters. So it's really an education. So I think we're going to dig into how DeerCast can kind of supercharge the knowledge that you already have as a whitetail hunter and not just a simple yes hunt or no hunt.
I think it'll be a good exercise to hear your guys' thoughts as well now that we're 4 years into this thing. And, when we first talked about it, like it was Terry and I talking that lingo. And now I hear you guys talk that as well. And I hear more and more people talk about, analyzing movement as it pertains to certain factors within the weather. So hopefully we're doing our job from an educational standpoint. And I think that's why you guys wanted to really dive into this podcast, because when we first came out with it, we had a lot of these talking points. And since then, maybe we've gotten a little lax on that. And in reality, the algorithm keeps getting stronger because now we have hindsight as foresight. We actually get to look at what the algorithm was putting out as a prediction, and then little bitty things that occurred during the season were like, you know what, we could tweak this, we could tweak that. If they saw the dashboard, Matt, that we were able to tweak and fine tune this algorithm, they would further understand just how complicated the algorithm is. It's amazing what all goes into it.
No doubt. And, it's this kind of the secret sauce for us. So it's the KFC recipe or the Coca-Cola recipe. So it stays kind of behind the scenes. But the reality of it is that we do continue to try to improve it. It's pretty dang close, but there might be a little something, we noticed that, I don't know, whatever you might choose, whichever variable, it actually needs to be tweaked. Instead of 9 mile an hour, maybe it's 11 mile an hour, in wind speed, or those types of small things are the things that are now being tweaked. Like year one, pretty dang close. Now year 4, it's little bitty incremental type changes that we're making to it to continue to try to improve it. And it does make a difference. So I look forward to jumping into it.
It does make a difference, certainly.
Beyond that, though, I think we're also going to talk about the Teardrop Heartbreaker story that is just launched on the Drury Outdoors YouTube channel and DeerCast and on our social feeds. And man, this one, you sent me a proof of it early on after you guys had it pretty close. And it was, I actually just said it in DeerCast today. I hate it for whoever the Heartbreaker story is about, because it was a bad ending, a heartbreaking ending. But these stories are so incredible, man. This deer is a giant, just a giant animal.
He was. He ended up going. We guessed him. I remember when we first got those pictures. I think Austin was in town at that time, and I sent the best pictures to everybody. I go, give me your guesses, and we were all between about 204 and 209, as I recall. And I'm like, this deer's definitely a 200-inch deer, and he ended up. It would have been like a 214 or so. And I'm not going to spoil the overall story, but it's a giant deer, and it is a heartbreaker, and you hate the ending that occurred, but it's the way it happened. But the roller coaster ride leading up to that is one, go down in the annals of Drury Outdoors history. Really. It's pretty cool. It was Wade Robinson was so close to killing a buck of a lifetime. It's not even funny. I'm talking fate. You've just got to see it to believe what that deer did to poor Wade.
Yeah, that specifically was the part that you just get really sucked into it, and you're just like, ugh. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine if this was me in these shoes, and you're there with him and Perry's there with him. It's like everything was lined up, but we'll dive into it a little bit here, a little bit further here in a minute. So Tim, go ahead and take the shout outs away, buddy.
Yeah, so we got Shane Peck 15 over on Apple Podcasts, and we love to get reviews on Apple Podcasts. So Shane, thank you. He says, love the podcast. Hey guys, you always put on a great show. I enjoy anytime Old Man Winter and Mark are on the show. It's nice to have a go-to outdoor show that airs every week when we only get 13 Critical Mass and Bow Madness for a short time of the year. P.S. If there's a PhD for soundboard controls, I would have to think Matt would qualify for an honorary doctorate. However, this would definitely increase his use of the "This is a House of Learned Doctors" soundboard plug, which may or may not be productive.
This is a house of learned doctors.
I think it would be very productive.
That's your wish.
Hey, thanks, Shane. I think Shane's a great guy. I think Shane deserves to be a DeerCast Elite subscriber. At the very least, I think Shane might become my new best friend. Thank you, Shane. All right. On to the next one. We got Brad Odom and DeerCast talking about Dave Kramer episode. Brad, he is definitely up there in the DeerCast Elite. He, since day one, has been one of our number one commenters in there. We always appreciate it. Thank you, Brad. He says, great podcast, guys. Dave is a great man that shows his passion for the outdoors. There's all kinds of tricks you can learn from these guys harvesting mature deer. You just have to listen. I want to thank Dave for being on the podcast and can't wait to see who's next. Everyone, be safe and God bless. He nailed it because Dave was fantastic on that podcast. And that was kind of the point in having all these Drury Outdoors guys jump on. I think it kind of gets lost sometimes just how effective they are because they are so effective. You kind of just take it for granted that, oh, the Drury guy, one of the team guys killed another big deer. Well, most of these guys are blue collar with smaller pieces. They're doing all the work themselves. It's not like they're going to a bunch of outfitters. They have a bunch of land, and that's kind of the misnomer out there. And I thought it would be great to highlight these guys on the podcast and let them kind of share some of the tips and tricks that they learned over the years. And Dave's got a bunch of them.
And we've got Caleb Byers and Brandon Jennings coming up on upcoming episodes. So be sure to stay tuned. Like if you like the tips and tricks and the strategy kind of talk, then definitely stay tuned for upcoming weeks episodes. There's some more good stuff coming.
Absolutely.
The other nice thing about it is you get to see the guy behind the hunts, and you take a guy like Dave Kramer. I mean, you could trust your last dollar with that guy. He's literally one of the finest human beings you will ever meet. And most of the team is that way. And I'm so glad you guys are doing more and more of this because A, they're incredible people. B, they're incredible hunters, and everybody's going to be able to learn from these guys, not only from a hunting standpoint, but just how to interact with people and treat others. And it's amazing what an incredibly talented yet unbelievably nice team we have at Drury Outdoors. Those guys are some of our best friends.
Absolutely. So we look forward to continuing to extend this part of the podcast and talking to these guys. And we got some really good episodes coming up. And we actually this weekend we have a digital summit here in St. Louis with some of our team members. And so we're going to film a couple more episodes in person with a few guys on Friday. So look forward to that and continuing to pump out some good episodes.
Awesome, man. That's great.
And we'll keep underwhelming our team members when they hop on our show.
Oh, we have a podcast?
Yeah. I think Brandon was definitely was surprised at just what level of podcast this was.
That was the pumpkin syndrome.
Yeah, that's podcast. The one where we turned out we were crying on it because we were laughing at each other so hard. So
definitely one you want to watch.
All right. So I want to jump into this and I'll kind of preface it with, as we internally talk about DeerCast and hey, the new year, what new features we might have or new improvements, and even just talking with the team about how we can communicate these things, it becomes more evident to Tim and I and the guys here in the studio, to Mark's point earlier. It's like we had all these great points and talking points at the beginning to help explain what DeerCast was, but I think we've lost sight of it because it's so easy to say, hey, today DeerCast said great, I went out there. But it's so much more than that. I want to get to, the next level of kind of a teaching standpoint and saying, okay, here's what all the app can do. Here's why it can do that. And then you go and use it to your benefit as far as how it directly relates to you and your property, because I really do believe it can fit anybody's property. And Tim and myself would be a great case in point. Tim, hunting a lot of suburban areas, a lot of smaller wooded areas, not hunting over the big food plots necessarily. In my case, hunting a lease where the farmer, kind of does his thing and, we have cattle in there and I don't really have any control. I think their first kind of thought is, well, it works for Mark and Terry's place, but how does it work for mine? And that's what I'd like to kind of dive into today.
Sure. Where do you want to start, guys?
Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, well, the kind of in general, we definitely hear a lot that works on Mark and Terry's properties. They manage like no other, and so of course their deer are going to move differently than anywhere else. So that's one factor, but just the other factor of like most people have a very limited amount of time to hunt, and they say, well, I'm going to hunt regardless. If I got Saturday off, whether a DeerCast says bad or great, I'm going to hunt. So I don't need an app to tell me when to hunt. I'm only going to hunt when I have time off. So within that, kind of how can DeerCast help a person that has very finite time off?
Well, certainly, I think it really comes down to, if you're limited on time, then, all right, I got Saturday and Sunday off, and per DeerCast, Saturday shows okay, and Sunday shows great. So DeerCast is picking up something in that person's area because it's analyzing 13 different weather variables as well as the 13 different phases on an hour-by-hour basis in their neck of the woods. So DeerCast has picked something up that it really likes. Okay, so if I'm that person and I have 2 days to hunt, the okay day, I'm still going to hunt, but I'm going to be very careful about where I go, anticipating that tomorrow might be a little bit better. And therefore, I'm going to choose in my mind what is the best opportunity for me to kill a deer for that day, as opposed to going in Saturday and potentially blowing that area out and then it not being so great on Sunday. Now, if you're very limited on spots and you have to hunt the same stand 2 days in a row, then maybe you sit out Saturday and you wait for Sunday. So it can help you make decisions along the lines of, yes, I want to hunt every day that I can, but can I be a little bit more wise with my time just by using some of those predictors? Now, if it says great both days, get after it, hunt all you can. If it says poor both days, I'd probably pick a spot a little bit on the outskirts, maybe try to kill a doe, something like that, and not do something that's going to affect my overall hunting success later in the season. Because one thing we all know, deer season is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So sometimes decisions you make, even weekends apart, can still affect your overall luck the following weekend if you make mistakes on this weekend. So it's decision making like that I think DeerCast can really aid the guy that has limited time. I'll refute just a little bit with some of the comments that you guys have brought to my attention about, and I've heard them too. Well, it only works on Mark and Terry's farms. Well, maybe that used to be the case when I had one giant farm in Iowa. I haven't owned a giant farm in Iowa since 2007. I sold my large farm then, and I bought several smaller satellite farms. In fact, I think 7 or 8 of the farms that I hunt on an annual basis are 80-acre parcels. I have another one that is a 50. I have another one that is a 41 and a half. So I'm hunting small parcels with a lot of different neighbors that have really good tactics, and they're trying to kill the same deer that we are. I'm assuming they are. So we have to be very smart about how we go in and attack any given target buck, at least the plan to go in there and try and take that deer. So, they could say all that they want, but that Teardrop story all occurred on an 80-acre parcel that was brand new last year. I had some knowledge of the deer from the previous year because I had some cameras there the previous year, late in the year, but I ended up purchasing the farm in the off season. And we went in, we were like, there's a giant here. We've got to, make a plan for him. In fact, there were 2 giants there. So that was a brand new 80-acre parcel, and DeerCast was spot on. We had never been on it before, and yet the forecast predictor was spot on. And it's like that way in Missouri on our small parcels. It's that way in Texas where we hunt. It's that way in Iowa where we hunt. And if it's off just a little bit, I go to my custom tab and I try to customize the prediction based on what I'm seeing out there in the field. So there's no doubt about it that weather affects deer movement. We have a very advanced formula within the algorithm as it pertains to the 13 weather variables and then the 13 different phases and how those weather variables change the deer's behavior within those 13 different phases. And it's a secret recipe, like Matt said. It's very complicated. Even when Terry and I sit down now and look at the algorithm on a board and refresh ourselves on a very consistent basis, sometimes we get a little bit mind numb over some of the things that we have in there. We have to refresh our memory, because the way that we used to predict deer movement, which was looking at all 13 on a daily basis and 3 hours later going, yeah, I think they're going to move today. Now the algorithm does that for us. So it makes us a little bit lazy. And sometimes when you've got the cheat sheet, you're not very good with your homework. So we have to make sure that we stay up on top of it. But we've got her tweaked out really well right now. And I have a lot of faith that it can produce no matter where you hunt or how you hunt.
I want to circle back to the DeerCast custom part briefly, because that is a question that I see quite a bit across social media or just in general get myself. Hey, what's that C, what's that little C at the top do? And one of the things that I've seen talked about is, well, why can't you just go in and individually change the, each property the way you want it? Well, we've made it so that you either can make it a more of a positive influencer or a negative influencer. We don't necessarily want to change the algorithm. We just want to change how it's weighted, I guess, overall. Can you dive into that a little bit?
Absolutely. We have a really high confidence level that those 13 different variables, as they pertain to the different phases in each individual area, are very accurate. Are they perhaps a little too optimistic in your area? Or are they perhaps a little too pessimistic in your area as it pertains to each phase or each time of the year? You can go in and tweak that. But if you started, I can rest assured, if anyone started trying to monkey with all the different levers, it's not going to end very well, because it is amazing what small changes do to the overall algorithm. So that much I'm very confident in. That algorithm, it may be a touch optimistic or a touch pessimistic in your area, but I would bet the farm that it is overall accurate as it pertains to a consistent prediction as to what the deer are doing.
So I think one of the underrated parts of the app in regards to DeerCast and the prediction would be the section that says understanding your DeerCast. And this is where I think, look, there's all kinds of different levels of hunter out there, and you may be, the best hunter out there. And you may not need to go to the understanding your DeerCast to see why Mark and Terry talk about a specific variable and dive into that for that phase and explain why it's important and what changes in that variable affect the DeerCast prediction. But by and large, I think there's a lot that we can learn as hunters out of that information. It's just Mark and Terry sitting there. It's not some glamorous video. It's Mark and Terry sitting there talking about each weather condition for that phase that you're in. And it's actually, the cool part about it is it gets weighted based on importance of that variable for that phase. So can you elaborate on that a little bit more, Mark?
I always use clouds as a great example for that. In the latter part of the season, some of my worst sits through the years, and I think people could probably relate to this, are those days where a heavy cloud bank comes in after you've had sun for several days. You get those heavy clouds, and if they sustain for a few days, it really does subdue the late season movement. I mean, terribly. However, that same and temperatures all of a sudden don't get as cold at night. Overall, the fluctuation between daytime high and nighttime low isn't nearly as drastic. However, that same cloud bank, when it hits September the 19th and it takes those 80-degree temperatures down, and all of a sudden they drop 20 or 30 degrees the same day, all of a sudden it's an influencer. Whereas at the end of the season, it really suppresses deer movement. And the algorithm catches both scenarios, but they do drastically different things at two different times of the year. And I think that's probably a good example in the fact that you look at December deer movement versus September deer movement, and somewhere in between those 13 phases in the middle part during the rut, all of that blends together. It's why we did 13, but they are drastically different in September than they are December. And then we even out that learning curve or that movement curve with the 13 phases, as well as the 13 different variables on a phase-by-phase basis. So it sounds rather complicated, but in reality, that's a simplistic look at what DeerCast does. September versus December are very different, and there's a big curve in between, and we interpret all those changes within that curve.
So it's not, and this is something I know a lot of people have referenced, that, well, DeerCast is essentially just running based on what the barometer is doing. Follow the barometer and you know when to hunt.
Man, that couldn't be further from the truth. The barometer is one of 13 phases. And, I'm not going to get into the secret sauce, but it is not even one of the, it is one of the most important ones, but there are several that are weighted as heavily, if not heavier, than the barometer. That's a fair way to say that. I think what occurs oftentimes, at least when people watch it, sometimes when the barometer does a certain thing, other weather variables fall in place and they're doing similar things themselves. And therefore it feels like it's just the barometer that's making the prediction, when in reality it's not. It's all of those things combined together, because there are a lot of other weather situations, approaching fronts and all that type of stuff, or what happens when the barometer is the same for 10 straight days. What if you get pressure that's 29.95 and it doesn't fluctuate very much over the next 7 or 8 days? Well, what else is affecting the deer movement? So it really depends on whether you're looking at a big approaching front or whether you're looking at stale air, as I like to call it, or a low pressure that's out there for many, many days. You still have peaks and valleys of movement even when barometer stays the same. So how do you predict those? Well, our other variables will pick up on those.
And that kind of gets, go ahead, Mark.
Does that make sense? If barometer stays the same, and it does during periods of the fall, it will just sit there when we don't have fresh air coming in or new air. Why are there fluctuations in movement? It's not just barometer.
Yeah. And that kind of gets to the other thing that people say is, well, I could get all this information in a weather app and just pick your weather app and you can see you have DeerCast in a weather app.
Well, we tried to, and you can go to weather apps and look, but I've not seen a weather app yet that collects all of the different variables and certainly some of the most important things and puts it in one screenshot or in an hour by hour fashion like DeerCast does for 10 straight days. We worked really hard to put all of that information out so that someone who wants to dive well beyond the daily prediction and then go into the understanding your DeerCast with Terry and I, all the different videos, and then look at all the weather variables on a day in and day out basis. You're not going to figure out the equation, but it will help you to understand what a 30-mile-an-hour wind does to them versus a 3-mile-an-hour wind does to them, and what change that's going to be September versus December, the rut, those types of things. Also, time of day. It's amazing to me how different they are at different times of the year as to when they'll move during the day. There are certain times of the year that mornings are the key. Other times of the year that afternoons are the key. Other times of the year where it's middle of the day. And it also interprets all of those times of day and spits that out for you. So it's a very complicated thing when you sit down and you look at how spread out the whitetail is and how they live. It can be very complicated and daunting. But, Terry and I sat there for 70 combined years trying to figure it out. And we're fairly confident we have.
I think part of the issue is that we, on purpose, we tried to oversimplify the end result. Like we can't say, we don't know what everybody's property is going to be like. And so it's not as simple as us saying a great would be like you saw 20 deer today. A great for you on your property. I tell Dad this all the time. Like, hey, on the lease, a great night. I saw 5 to 10 deer. That may be a really great night for somebody else. 1 to 2 deer might be great. So we try to oversimplify it in the way that it's like, okay, it's a great night. It's a good night. It's an okay. It's bad. It's poor. That way that you can interpret it to your hunt for your farm the way it needs to be interpreted. We're simply saying these are your chances of seeing movement or not seeing movement are greater during these days or are okay during these days. An okay day is probably still pretty dang good. That's the other part. It's like, when it says great, I know I'm going to try to hunt no matter what. But if it's okay, that's when the understanding your DeerCast and diving into it and trying to figure out, okay, should I go hunt? Should I take the 1.5-hour drive up and the 2-hour drive back and get home late? Like that's when you got to really hone in on it and try to understand the DeerCast and the prediction. And so I think in some respects, we've oversimplified it so that anybody, no matter what the level, can understand what's going on. But if you are somebody that wants to really dive in, to your point, the understanding your DeerCast is where you can do that, and then you can learn. And that's over the 4 or 5 years that we've had it. That's what has helped me the most, is understanding it better. I don't just have these talking points that I've heard you guys say over the years and regurgitated. Like, it took me putting them in practice and seeing it firsthand. And where the real light bulb came off is having cell cameras and seeing, holy crap, like DeerCast is saying this and they're moving. I'm not even there. Like, I don't even have to see it now. I see it on these cameras. That's where it really became clear and evident to me. And Tim, I don't know what your experiences are, because you're hunting a much different style, but I think you would qualify in that, like, hey, seeing 2 or 3 deer might be a great night.
Yeah. And I mean, I live and die by the hourly. I love the hourly view. And Matt, you and I both took advantage of that. Last year we killed on the same night. We had a series of poor and bad days. There was at like mid-October, and all of a sudden we had one day where there was a cool front coming through later in the afternoon. I left the studio a little bit early. You were over in Illinois. I think that was your Illinois buck, and we both killed that evening. But like leading up to it, it was, you looked at the hourly, it was bad, poor, okay. But then you had this little window of time in the afternoon, heading into the evening, where it was good and great. And we both, put the time in, organize our schedules to make that happen. And it really paid off. So that the ability to look granularly and then organize your life around that is invaluable.
Well, and to take it a step further, in that particular instance, and we talk about it on 13, that front was originally supposed to be moving in like to where the last few hours of hunting light, the front was it was like raining really, really hard. And, I was just going over there to be able to be there for the next morning. And it ended up, the good part about DeerCast, and that the actual forecast part of it is changing. It's constantly being updated. So as the weather front kind of changed all of a sudden, it's like, holy crap, Scott and I grabbed our gear and we jumped in the truck to be able to make it there in time for the last 2 hours of the hunt that night or that afternoon. And we had an encounter with the buck I ended up killing the next day because of it. I wouldn't have been there in time for that hunt at all if I hadn't been keyed into that hourly part of the forecast and understand exactly what was going on with it. So, I mean, Tim and I both have young families. Time is very vital as far as spending as much time at home as possible. So to me, I feel like my success has grown over the past few years simply because I'm paying more attention to the right variables, the right times to when I should spend my time afield. And that's where it's been the most valuable.
100%.
I would say this, in addition to everything you guys just said about your experiences there last year with it. Here's a great test you can do with DeerCast, because DeerCast is going to predict not only movement during the day, but it can also, if you watch it, and watch your trail cameras in hindsight, can predict which nights they're going to move the best. So one exercise that I've asked some guys to do that kind of were naysayers or didn't believe much about it, I said, don't believe it in terms of a forecast. I said, but screenshot it every day for 30 straight days, and then look at all of your trail cameras through those 30 days and tell me which days the deer moved the best. When you look at your trail cameras, just look through them and go, wow, they moved really well here. They moved really well here. They really moved very well here. Because oftentimes trail cameras show deer movement in an unfazed state. In other words, they don't have human intrusion out there affecting their movement nearly as much as when you're sitting there hunting. And I said, then look back after you say, they moved best on these 7 days. Then go look back at our DeerCast for the entire month and tell me how the DeerCast were on those days. It's a very good exercise. And in almost every case, they're going to come back and say, you know what? You're right. DeerCast was spot on. It is going to catch those times that make deer move, whether it be during the day or night, because the same weather is affecting them into the night, although some days they're a little bit more daylight than others. So it's a good exercise for naysayers out there. Check it out, screenshot it 30 straight days, and then look at your photos over the previous 30 days across a variety of cameras, and it'll help you understand a little bit better about it. Because I had an example last year where we had a great and all the weather stuff lined up, and we only saw a couple, 3 deer on a field that we typically see a pile of deer on. Well, I can also see into a deep bed that's probably 300 or 400 yards away. It's a big overgrown field, and there was movement down there all night. I mean, they did move great. The herd just didn't simply come to our field. They turned and went up the ridge and went to a different food plot up on top, and literally one doe took a bunch of bucks up there, and that was the difference between us seeing them that night and whoever was probably up on top seeing them that night. So yes, they moved great. They just didn't come by me. So that was a stand choice on my part, not necessarily an incorrect deer cast.
And that's an interesting point, because those are factors obviously we have no control over, as far as, your access or neighboring, accessing their own property or whatever conditions or variables might be happening in and around. But I think about that often because we have a group text for the 13 cast and who saw what, that afternoon hunt or morning hunt or whatever. And a lot of times I sit and wonder, was it simply the lack of being in the right spot if I didn't see something and everybody else had a great night? Or, in Dad's case, if he's hunting his Missouri farm, he still does have a good sized farm there in Missouri. He's one guy. And if you're in the wrong spot, it's, you think this was a crappy night. It doesn't mean that they weren't on another field,
Check those trail cameras. If you question it and go, man, it did feel like it should have been a great night, I didn't see anything. Remember that date, and then check those trail cameras down the way and go, you know what? They did move that day.
Yeah.
I was just in the wrong spot. Or I ran them out on the way in. That's the thing about deer. They don't let you know you make mistakes very often. They're very good about living, they're really good at it.
And that's not a cover, CYA kind of a reply. It's just kind of the reality of it. Like we just can't always predict those outside factors for you. We just, generally speaking, DeerCast is made around weather variables and what you guys have felt made deer move, what variables over what times of the season. So that's in its purest form. That's what it is.
It is. And it's just another aid for people to take out there. It's just another tool in your toolbox. You still have to sit in the right spot. You got to have the right access. You got to, be smart about when you're going to rattle, when you're going to call, all those different things. So, but there are a lot of tips within DeerCast that can also hopefully help make you a better hunter. It's worth watching a lot of the videos we've got stacked into that thing. It's unbelievable how many videos are in there and how many DeerCast dailies are we up to now, Tim? 700 and some?
Oh, no.
Like 1,300.
1,300. All right.
It's a pile.
It's an amazing amount of information. There's a daily article in there. And if you go back and read some of those, you're bound to learn something. That much I can promise you. If for no other reason, if you think the algorithm stinks and you just don't believe in it, there's 1,300 free articles in it, and also the DeerCast track. That's a whole nother feature that is unique to DeerCast, laser focused on making you better in the final hours of trying to find your animal. There's nothing else out there like it, and I would defy anybody to say that DeerCast track can't help you in most situations.
Because one of the things I love about deer hunting is if you are open, you are always learning. Like you should always be learning and readjusting assumptions that you had and challenging preconceived notions. And it's a mental game more than anything else. And I know, like, a part of our kind of in the heart of what we're doing is we want to help people get better at their craft. And I love the fact that we're not telling people go on autopilot, just do what DeerCast says. Like you said, Mark, it's another tool. Like, it's there to augment the woodsmanship skills that you have and the knowledge and experience that you have where you hunt, how you hunt. It's there to augment and change that and make that better, not replace it. We're not asking anyone to turn your brains off and just do what an app says, because I think I could speak for you guys and say you wouldn't want to hunt. You wouldn't want an app just to tell you what to do and when to do it. That part of the mystique behind the experience is playing the game and playing the mental game, figuring all these things out.
No question.
Well, I think a direct correlation to that would be, okay, say you didn't have a piece of property, and so you still want to be able to hunt, so you purchase an outfitted hunt each year, and so you go somewhere, they sit you in they hung the stands, they put in the food plots, and they're telling you where to sit, and at the end of the day, you might have killed a giant, but you're like, do I know anything more today than I did yesterday? Maybe, but the chances are you didn't quite learn as much. And so DeerCast kind of in a similar way is it's there. It can be autopilot for you if that's what you're looking for. But if you're really trying to learn something, there's so much information there, and not just in the paid version, the free version. Those articles are all free, and there's tons of posts in the social feed that are free, and team members leaving tips and stuff. You can really advance your overall knowledge of deer hunting, and not just deer hunting, turkey hunting, and just general woodsmanship skills. You can learn a lot in a short amount of time. And so it's like, all right, there's this thing that easy button commercial. I can click the easy button and be on autopilot, or, the information in here, I could really start to dissect it and start to understand or learn things on my own. And that would be a kind of a way to explain the app and what abilities it can have for you.
There is a massive amount of information inside that app. I mean, massive. So if you take the time to read through it and listen to it and watch it, it's going to do nothing but benefit you in the long run.
Even something as simple in the free version, I believe I'm correct on this, Tim, and correct me if I'm wrong, but on the understanding your DeerCast section, there is always, because we give you one free day of the DeerCast, and there's always a video that talks about the 13 phases, like that phase that you're in for your area for that time of year. And it's a compilation video of every season of 13, minus this one that's airing right now. It's a compilation video of everything that Mark and Terry have spit out about the phase itself, and each tactic that we use for that phase. Like, it's unbelievably informative, just 7 to 10 minute video, and it's all right there for you to be able to access if you want. And learn, okay, to Mark's point a while ago, should I rattle? Should I not? Like, they're going to tell you that the times of year that those things work better than maybe other times of year. All that's just sitting there waiting for you to go through and dive into the videos. So it can be a lot more if you start to dissect the app and dive into it.
Yep. Easy to use. And it takes some time to master it just because of how much information is there. And I'll say, Mark, you mentioned DeerCast Track. My daughter Sophie killed her first whitetail last year. The deer was quartering towards us. It was a very difficult shot. She was using the Mission crossbow. I don't know that she would have made that shot had we not been going over DeerCast Track and her understanding in 3 dimensions where the organs sit inside that deer. And even though she was quartering towards us, she hit this doe really good on a really difficult shot for anyone to make. And it was because she had seen the hide. You can toggle the exterior of the deer on or off, and you can see where the bones sit, and you can see where all the organs are relative to the skeletal structure. And that's huge. You talk about, like, the best way to recover a deer is putting a great shot on it in the first place. And so for younger hunters or for newer hunters, there's just no better way for them to understand how to make an ethical shot than using the DeerCast Track tool, and then to see the videos in there that are populated based on where you want to hit that deer or where you did hit the deer, anywhere from the neck on down to the lower leg. I think one of those is courtesy of Old Man Winter himself.
Yeah, easy. There's probably quite a few of his shots in there.
It's like, how do we get that shot? But things happen, and the arrow doesn't always go where you want it to. So DeerCast Track is really invaluable, both pre-hunt and during, and especially after the hunt. I mean, there's no second guessing in the world. Like, those seconds after you make the shot, you want to have an informed second opinion.
And our guys in there, Tracker John and Bobby Culbertson, they're so captivating in their presentations. Like if you'll just take the time to move the cursor to different hits, like hits you don't want to make, it's like, I really don't want to hit one here, but what if I did? And then listen to how their knowledge of breaking down those hits and multitude of deer that they've tracked through the years with that exact same type hit. It's an amazing teaching tool, as you said, whether you be for old or young. The young hunters get very excited about it because they can move the cursor and peel the hide back and understand all the anatomy of the deer. Older hunters go, I've really never heard anybody talk about tracking in this sense. And that's why we chose Tracker John and Bobby Culbertson, because the conversations I've had with them through the years, I'm like, these guys know more about tracking. They forgot more about tracking than most guys I run around with in circles. And I run around with some great hunters. But so often the attention is put on everything up to the shot and very little attention is given to everything after the shot. And in reality, that's probably more important than everything that occurred prior to that shot. So it's an incredible tool. And I hope anyone that hasn't seen it would try it out.
And we've talked before on the podcast about the mythical no man's land on the deer, and you look at the diagram, you see like the lungs fill up that whole chest cavity.
They do. I think the no man's land comes into how many arteries did I cut or how many arteries did I not cut, and how much damage and how much hemorrhage is there based on where that arrow slid through. There's a huge difference between an arterial hit and just a straight double lung hit, or perhaps even a heart hit. That's one of the things Tracker John, we were talking about it last year. Taylor's shot in show 1 looks seemingly perfect, looks like a 10 ring or 12 ring. And we had a whale of a time finding that deer. And he said, one of the things I struggle with the most are heart shot deer. If you hit the aortic coming into it or the aortic arch, it's, 5 seconds or less, and they're laying at 50 yards. If you don't, and you just hit the muscle of the heart, it is a far different tracking scenario that's going to be painted out in front of you. They just don't bleed as much. It takes them a little bit longer, and it's easy to misinterpret. And that's an inch. I always say an inch can cost you a mile. The same thing is true whether you're through the liver or through the stomach. Again, that's an inch. Or whether you hit the heart or the liver or the back of the lung or the liver. All of those inches as you go from shoulder towards the back of the deer often require unbelievably different scenarios in the approach on how you're going to track that deer.
Well, and if you look at it like on television, we just don't have the time to showcase a track job the way it probably deserves to be. It's just the kind of the nature of the beast, 30-minute episode, and all the sponsor obligations and all the fluff that goes into it. You just don't have the time, unfortunately. So, there's probably a real lack of teaching around tracking. And like you said, it's the most important part. You could spend all this time, money, and effort. You make the shot, and then, okay, now what? What if you don't have blood? That happens. You want to make a perfect shot every time, but what if there's no blood? Well, okay, now what? What should I do here? So there's all kinds of tips and tricks there from Tracker John and Bobby Culbertson that can kind of lead you down a path of trying to recover that animal. And it's finally the opportunity that we've always wanted. It's probably, harkens back to the old VHS days where we could really dive into a topic like this and really, explore it and flesh it out. Well, DeerCast Track, that's all those videos. I forget how many 100-something videos are in there.
There's a pile. I don't know the exact number. There's a few hundred in there though.
Yep. Over 120.
Yeah. And so all those videos were, meticulously crafted together and approved by everybody involved in it to make sure we were saying the right thing and showing the right thing. Like that's an encyclopedia of deer tracking that you just cannot get at your fingertips anywhere else. Like, you're used to calling that maybe there's a guy in your community that, hey, so-and-so, he's the man when it comes to tracking or hunting, or if he's the go-to guy that you lean on or your friend or buddy. Well, here's another opinion for you. And $20 to have it for a full year isn't that crazy of a price tag when you think about all the money and time you've invested to just get to that point. So, and to further your comment about showing Sophie the hits ahead of time. That's actually an email we get quite often from our consumers, grandpas or dads, or even like hunter safety courses. They utilize DeerCast Track as a teaching tool to help new hunters understand exactly what they mean by hit them behind the shoulder. You always say hit them behind the shoulder. Okay, what's that mean? Now you can peel away the hide and show them. So that's it's just a very valuable tool in that regard.
Heck yeah.
Very good.
Well, anything else we want to cover DeerCast wise?
Hopefully we shed some light on some of the underpinnings underneath the app. And I agree, we might have gotten away from the talking points a little bit over the last couple of years, but we've certainly hit on a great many of them today. And just rest assured that we are ever tweaking it as well to make it more and more accurate. The more hindsight we get based on the prediction versus reality, the more accurate it becomes. And we tweak it each and every fall, and literally some weeks each and every day. But it's all in the goal to make it 100% accurate. Of course, we're never going to get there, but our goal is to make it that accurate. In my opinion, it's over 90% accurate, though. That's where I think it's at.
Heck yeah. Well,
all right. Should we dive into some Teardrop a little bit before we jump into the question of the day? And
Teardrop, and we start the story about how one picture can change your life or your plans, and everybody's dreaming of that one picture, right? And I remember looking at that card because I fly through them pretty quick, and I got my hand paces down where I stop and save the photo and blah, 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 I'm on, but I watch every single photo. And when he hit the screen going as fast as it could, I almost jumped out of my chair because I've been waiting on that photo literally my entire life. And even as quick as they were flying by, I was like, whoop, that's one of the best deer I've ever seen in my life. And I backed it up real quick, started analyzing them. I was like, holy cow, I've been waiting to see that photo my entire life. And I think we all wait for that when we look at our cards, is that deer that just makes your eyes pop out. And Teardrop was just that. And we nicknamed him Teardrop because he had double drop tines on the same side, both coming down off of that right beam. And we were like, that's a pair of tears, coming down out of his beam side by side. And we called him Teardrop because they both had a little bit of a drop and bulby look on those early velvet pictures. And of course, he breaks one of those off in velvet just a few weeks later, but he still had one really long one, and the other one was a partial. But the story started from that first photo, and then it went on and on after that. We had to make food plot changes, blind changes, access changes. We went from an 80 to go, well, let's see how it does this year, guys. Hopefully this is a great performing farm for us to, this is the hottest 80 in the world. And we've got to make sure that we do our best to hunt it right and figure it out all at the same time. We had not ever sat it. So here are these pictures of this giant deer, and we have no hunting history on a farm. So that was challenging to us because typically we have some hunting history with the spot, much like you guys do, and you gain that intimacy with your farms, and you have a confidence level based on pictures. I think I can make a play on this guy and kill this guy. Well, we had none of that. So, man, the strategy sessions were long and late most nights trying to figure out how to make a play on this deer. And it turned out we made some good decisions, and we played him right. But you'll have to watch the rest of the episode to see exactly what I'm talking about.
The deep tease.
That is over in the DeerCast news feed and in the DoD TV section of DeerCast. So you can find it in a couple different places.
Yeah,
right on.
We'll link it over to YouTube as well. And so it's like I said, I don't know, it's about a 20-minute story roughly. And it just totally captivates you for that entire time. Like there's not a period where like, this is kind of slow. This is like fast forward through this part. It's like good deer hunting action and, a couple twists along the way with another deer. And, that's the part that was pretty fascinating and how that all kind of wrapped back around. So there's a lot to it.
It does. I think the other thing that story did, it really highlights Wade and Perry in there and how important they are to everything we do here on these farms, and much like Forrest is with Terry, and much like Scott is with Matt, like this is not a one way or the highway type deal. We collectively talk about each individual deer, each individual plot, each individual strategy. And it's amazing. And I really love that. I love to be able to talk with other people, get their thoughts, and then we collectively try to make a great decision that makes the most sense for the resource, or to go, take an individual deer. And I think Wade and Perry really come out, and you understand just what deep thinkers they are within this as well. For as young as they are, like those guys eat, sleep, and breathe turkey and deer hunting. And that's one of the reasons I love to go to work with them every single day. They are very good at what they do. And the same goes for Forrest over on Terry's farm. We are blessed with incredibly talented young men that are as passionate about the resource in the sport as we are.
Absolutely. Well, I think there's some teachable stuff in that piece as well. Like just generally speaking, some of your food plot architecture, and how you kind of create a plot to try to incentivize movement, and there's some good stuff to be learned out of it as well.
We did try to create it to incentivize movement. We also picked on the shady side of the bottom, because we felt like that's where they were going to come out and spend the most time. And we had a few things that we put into the overall design of that. And we took a really big field. There was a big destination clover field, 3 acres or so. And we were like, we got to get him to one end. We don't know where he's going to pop out on this thing. And we put time-elapse cameras up to find out where the movement was at without us being there. And I mean, we went to work. He had the wrong 3 guys after him. We just didn't get it done. He still won. We felt good about our plan, but it did not come to fruition. It's like the ultimate chess match, right? Absolutely love hunting. So
many times it doesn't happen. You know what I mean?
More often than not, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're always showing the highlights. It's like, everybody says the highlights of your life is the Instagram feed. Well, that's what TV's been for us for so long, and DVDs and now, the YouTube channels and DeerCast. It's the highlights. That's just the nature of the beast. But this kind of shows a little of all.
It does. It absolutely does.
All right. And Timothy, should we move on to the question of the day?
Another highlight of the show.
Oh, well, all right. So the question of the day is proudly brought to you by Cold Steel, professional knives for real hunters.
Hi, this is Mitch from east of Cincinnati in Georgetown, Ohio. I know you guys use the 350 Legend a lot now, and with Ohio going from just shotguns and muzzle loaders to straight wall cartridges, I am now using a 350 Legend and wondered which the Winchester ammo you use and why, the 150 grain or the 180 grain. I'm used to muzzle loader bullets and shotgun slugs and have been torn on which grain to go with for whitetail deer here in Ohio. I shot one with a 150 grain bullet last year and was not very impressed with the results, and having to use a follow-up shot with a good first shot. Thanks. I would like to hear your guys' opinions.
Thank you, Mitch.
Yeah, Mark, take it away. I thought that's pretty interesting, because it's not really the results that we had been seeing, but go ahead and jump in there.
Absolutely. I shoot the 150 grain bullet, Deer Season XP. And I think that's the same load that you're shooting, Matt and Terry. We've all landed on that 150 just because it's a little flatter, and we've had 0 issues with terminal performance. I mean, that Deer Season XP in any round takes you from it takes you from, I always liken it to like shooting a 410 versus a 12 gauge on a turkey. I mean, it has that much more knockdown and that much more power. I mean, that Deer Season XP is fast to expand. It's a flat shooting round. And I love it. So I'm sorry you had issues with that last year on a deer, but we have not experienced any of that. However, we do control our overall distances. I'd say the bulk of our shots, Matt, are 150 and in with that round. I did shoot one deer in Texas when it first came out at like 230 yards, and I dropped that deer in its track. I hit him right in front of the shoulder, and it took him right down. I think it was 236 or 239 yards, something like that. I would not hesitate to continue with that round, Mitch. I mean, we've had excellent luck with that particular round, but you can't ever forget about the fact that those straight wall cartridges, they're not center fires. I don't think they have the punch that a shotgun slug does. I would equate them to a muzzleloader with a bullet like the bleed bullet from Traditions. I think the range is probably similar. It's a little bit faster, but man, are they accurate. I absolutely love it. You may be holding an XPR when you're shooting it from Winchester, but that doesn't mean it's a centerfire. That's not a 270. It's not a 300 Win Mag. It's still a straight wall cartridge. So you have to be disciplined in terms of what distance you're willing to shoot. But man, you can see it in our shots. I mean, just the damage that deer season XP does is amazing. So I am really high on the 350 Legend, and I like it at 150 grain.
I think, it's the weird part about it is you do see, because we get to see so many hits a year, 120, 130 from our team. It's amazing how deer react to hits. It's vastly different from deer to deer. Sometimes you think you hit them perfect and they run, 200 yards or whatever the case may be. So I wouldn't discount that side of it, especially you said you had a great initial shot. So sometimes a deer's will to live is just frankly incredible, and that they can surprise you. But, for us, like Mark said, I mean, because the video side of what we do, really 150 to 200 is kind of whether we're shooting a 30-06 or a 350 Legend, or a muzzleloader, might be 100 yards to 150 yards. We're always trying to get a little bit of a closer shot, just for video sake. So I don't know, what experiences other guys are. I'm sure there's forums out there online that you can look at and check into, but from our experience, and I mean, I've seen all the hits and Mark has as well. I can't recall in the 2 years or 3 now that we've used 350 where I've seen any negative, effects after the first hit. Like typically they fall right there or fall on camera for us.
Yeah, I don't recall ever losing one with a 350 shot either, and that's across probably 25 to 30 whitetails. Like the terminal performance has been outstanding for us. So I would give it another try, Mitch, and I like the 150.
All right. How about that wildlife word? It's brought to you by Tracker Off-Road. Rugged strength meets relentless drive. Okay, so we talked a little bit about deer hemorrhaging. We were talking about DeerCast track a little bit ago. And so an average 150-pound whitetail has around 8 pints of blood in its system. It's estimated a deer must lose at least this percentage of blood to be easily recovered. So is it A, 35%, B, 10%, C, 5%, or D, 1%?
I would think A, 35%. To be easily recovered, you would have to lose, I would think, 35%.
I have no clue in the world, so I'm going to go with 35% because Mark knows a lot more about deer than I do.
Yeah, good choice, guys. So this came to us from Dan Schmidt over at Deer and Deer Hunting. He did an article a few years back about what it takes to really put a deer down and how important hemorrhaging is, especially when you're bow hunting. And they said, 35%. And that works out to around 2 pints of blood for a standard 150-pound whitetail. So that's a lot of blood a deer's got to lose to go down.
And had you asked me without giving me the A through D, I would have guessed even higher than that, just based on how hard they are to find. I would have guessed 50 or greater. They have an unbelievable will to survive.
Well, and you think about it, unless, we've seen some pretty awesome blood trails on a rage, hit and where it's like, oh my God, spraying out both sides. But there's a lot of times where you see not a lot of blood as well. The old muzzleloaders that we used to use and that bullet combo, like there usually wasn't hardly any blood. So, it all kind of goes inside, I guess, and just kind of pulls up inside them. But, you think if they're losing that much blood, you'd think you'd see more of it. and it'd be a little easier to find them.
It is tough.
All right. Well, anything, Mark, before we let you go? So what currently, I'm sure you guys have the majority of your food plots in as we sprint towards the, kind of the end of prep and the beginning of season. What are the key things you guys are trying to accomplish?
We still have some hawk blinds to put in place. We've got 2 more food plots that we're trying to get in. Both are new, or at least an addition to an old one. There are probably, 30 plus in the ground. We've got an additional 45 or 50 clover fields. We have to mow one last time, spray one last time. So we've got some work ahead of us as we sprint towards that starting line, essentially.
So let me ask you this. If you have a food plot that maybe you didn't catch the rain, or maybe you caught a little rain, but it's a lot of weeds are coming up. It's just not just didn't germinate, or whatever the reason may be. Is there still time to replant? And if so, would you go with something different, or would you stick with what you originally planted in there? I mean, we're getting to a point where it's too late to do some of the things you had planted earlier?
Well, it's certainly not too late to put in your brassicas or radishes. I mean, we're getting towards the tail end of that, but you're still in good shape there. And it really comes down to H2O. If we get enough rain, they'll grow very quickly. But if you get a half inch here and it's 3 weeks before the next half inch, no, you're not going to have enough time for that plant to, produce what you want it to. At that point, you go back to those fail safes, wheat, rye, oats. Biologic has a product that I always buy just as an insurance policy for this type of scenario. It's called winter grass. Comes up quick. It can be up and deer be on it within 5 days. So I've planted as late as October 1 winter grass and still had good plots by mid to late October, but you got to catch the rain. If you don't get the rain, it's not going to do you any good. But if you catch a lot of rain, they can outgrow palatability at times. I've seen that happen. So I love that winter grass product for late in the planting sequence.
Very good. I'm asking for a friend.
Taking notes over here.
All right. Well, Tim, you have anything else to add, buddy?
No, just congratulations to Dennis Ferris, who won the hunt with Mark and Terry this fall. So stay tuned to DeerCast this October to see how his hunts go down, see what happens.
It'll be November. He's coming in rifle season.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome. Coming in rifle. He's from Wichita, so he's like, hey, I'm willing to drive. He's retired, 32 years Air Force, so he has a fairly flexible schedule. He goes, I'm willing to drive. I go, all right, let's play a weather front, and let's wait till we get the right weather. And Terry's fairly open. I'm fairly open. So we're going to try and make sure Dennis has a wonderful trip based on how the deer are acting and what the weather's doing at that time.
Sweet. He's in for a ride. I tell him that.
I hope so, but just so thankful for his service and very anxious to meet Dennis. He seems like one heck of a nice guy on the phone.
Very good. So how many people had put in for that? Was it 58,000?
No, 64
or 65,000.
64, 65. Yeah. Very good. Good. That's and honestly, pretty good odds, really, if you think about it. I mean, that's a heck of a hunt. So I'm sure he's excited.
You think that is good odds? 1 in 6.
Yeah, I do. If you think about the lottery, I mean, I'm just thinking of it in the sense of a lottery. It's a lot harder to win the lottery. And for some people, this is like winning the lottery.
Prize is a little bit greater. Yeah.
Like I said, depends your point of view. I mean, this might be the biggest prize this guy ever, could ever dream of. So
I hope so. We're anxious to take him, and we look forward to it.
All righty. Well, I will. We look forward to seeing you here in St. Louis. We're going to have the whole clean together. So I'm sure we're going to have some shenanigans happening. And like I said, we're going to film a couple new podcasts on Friday, looking out towards the end of August into September. But man, it's here. I can feel it. We're almost into the season.
Absolutely. Can't wait. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Until next time. Peace out.
The results are in.
DeerCast said it was supposed to be a great night.
Well, here you go.
DeerCast said great.
It doesn't exist anywhere else but in DeerCast.
Hunters love DeerCast's exclusive deer movement forecast. Get ahead of your game with DeerCast.
We're adding new videos every week, so make sure to click that subscribe button and check out all of our amazing content. This episode of DoD TV was brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's.